Say thanks. Before we begin, I want to thank all 104 of my subscribers. I passed 100 a few days ago and saw that I have 4 new ones, and I genuinely want to say that I am truly amazed that you are all here and grateful for the sub. I hope to keep you entertained as time goes on, so let's try to hit 200 or beyond. Lee. Welcome to episode 5 of Star Trek Starfleet Academy. I will be reviewing this episode, but at the same time, I kind of want to talk about how this show is really not made for anybody. It's really just a show that has been written to fill a void, to make sure that the brand continues. But I don't think there was any real thought put into whether or not this show will have any lasting benefit to the overall brand. So we should jump straight in, continuing our eulogy for Star Trek. Once again, starting off with the Star Trek 60th anniversary. I don't even know what this is. It's like they're just taunting us with the fact that they own Star Trek, but whatever. So this episode is called Series Acclamation Mill, and it's basically the backstory for Sam. The episode starts off. Do I really even have to say anything about these guys? They've added so many different new aliens that I really don't think they're going to spend any time talking about them. They're just there. They'll get screen time, but and it's a credit to the people who made the actual prosthetics and things like that, because it does take imagination to make this stuff up. But if there's nothing behind it, and if it's never explained, does it really matter? But this episode starts off with Sam. She's talking about herself and how cool she is, which is basically just the writers telling us that this is my OC, #DoNotSteal. I don't want to go so far and say that Sam is a Mary Sue. That's actually Caleb. He's a Gary Stu. He can do anything. He can hack. He can hold his own in a fight. He can drink. He can pilot a ship with no trauma. Even though when he was a child, he was forcefully abandoned by his mother. Hasn't seen her in several years, and he had to survive on his own. But for some reason, he's just a well-adjusted human being. Zero trauma, anything, no hang-ups. He's just a normal, well-adjusted man. And everybody likes him too. Anyway, she talks about how she has been sent to assess whether or not biological life forms are worthy of being back in contact with her species from the planet Kask. So it's another isolationist planet. They're trying to figure out if they can trust biological entities again, and they sent her. Why they sent her is kind of a mystery, and they never really explained it, because she's functionally retarded. She is an emissary, keep that in mind, to bridge the gap between normal people and holograms, or photonic beings, whatever you want to call them, that the biologics can reintegrate with holograms, because she explains that her species, they were once created by biological entities, and then they were made to be slaves. So we got yet another real-world slavery allegory in this show. And I'm starting to feel like Tolkien, who hated allegory, but I digress. She explains that they were treated poorly by the biologics that created them, and I assume there was a war or something, but the biologics left. And when they did, somehow the holograms became sentient, and they formed their own society. And in doing so, they felt like they couldn't trust biological entities ever again. So sending her to Starfleet Academy is kind of a big thing for their species. Again, why they sent a functionally retarded person to be their emissary makes no sense. And it's funny because this episode, they mirror what happened with Benjamin Sisko and how he was the emissary to the prophets of Bajor. Now, in Deep Space Nine, Benjamin Sisko was the emissary. Turns out that he was actually created by the prophets of Bajor, the celestial aliens, the wormhole aliens, created specifically to fill a role in the future. He ended up going to Starfleet Academy, becoming a great officer, went through his own trials and tribulations, and eventually became the captain of Deep Space Nine, where he showed his intelligence, he showed his capability, And he showed that he was able to fulfill this role. He essentially saved the day. Sorry, I'm playing with my tricorder. He saved the day, showing that he was the correct one to send. Now, we contrast that in this episode with Sam. Sam is also an emissary, but she looks at her role as if it's the same as Benjamin Sisko's. And it totally and completely is not. There's nothing that she's doing that is the same. Because she's been sent to see if humans, or not humans, but if Starfleet Academy is the place that they can send more of their holographic people and figure out whether or not they can reintegrate with biological entities. And she has done nothing to show that. Even the fact that she's like a 16-year-old girl shows that they don't understand what they're doing. Because she, as a child, still developing, which I don't know why you would be created to be a child if you can be a fully grown adult and be fully developed in all of your mental capacities. But they've sent her to fulfill this role, and she's basically just joked around and been silly the whole time. Now, that's not to say anything against the actress. I want to make that very clear. The actress, I cannot remember her name, and I'm not going to look it up because I don't care. But the actress is actually, she's very vibrant. She's very, she's actually funny. I don't actually mind her. And I appreciate what she's doing with the character. And that all comes from the actress. So when they say that they rewrote this character because they met the actress, that's great. Because this actress, she is, I don't want to say she's a breath of fresh air, but she actually is trying to do something with her character, as opposed to everyone else who is very bland. There is also a B plot in this episode, but there's a B and a C plot. It's so thin. It's not even worth talking about. I will talk about it a little bit, but I'll do it later. So we have the introduction of how Bully Boy here, he and his species, being Kionian, they can't eat bananas because if they eat bananas, they will throw up glitter. And I feel like if I just watch this show too much, I will throw up glitter. And why glitter? Is it something within their biological makeup that produces glitter, which is just microplastic? Why? Why? Are we ever going to find out why? Is there ever going to be a reason given as to what the point is of having this species puke glitter when they eat bananas? I don't know. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. We also get the addition of, well, I don't want to say the addition, but the return of Dax, the Trill symbiote from Deep Space Nine as well. Played by Tawny Newsome here, who she wrote this episode, and like all bad writers in Hollywood, it's a self-insert, because even though she played Mariner in the Lower Decks, she's written herself in the show. She has written herself in as a Cardassian Trill hybrid of some sort, which I never knew that the Cardassians were black or could ever be black. But again, like I said, it is a self-insert through and through. I feel like that is just lazy writing. I feel like it's not really being honest to what you've been given control of to write. And in lieu of creating a whole new character that has similar aspects of previous characters that have come before, you just put yourself in there. So she starts off with this children's book about Benjamin Sisko, who has essentially become a kind of Mohammed figure to the Bajorans. Because again, they can't just write anything normal. They have to put modern day things into it. She essentially explains his whole backstory, and they basically tell her that you can actually go to a museum dedicated to Sisko virtually, and she ends up doing that. This is more of the B plot or C plot, that doesn't matter. So she ends up going to this museum virtually in the school, in that same room that they're always in, and she learns a little bit more about him, which she ends up talking to one of the orbs of Bajor, which doesn't really make sense because this is a virtual version of the orb. It's not the real thing. So how can she... I know she's a hologram and she's talking to another hologram, but the hologram that is projecting the museum doesn't hold the same power as the actual orb. So I don't know what she thinks she's accomplishing by talking to the hologram of the actual orb. It kind of doesn't make any sense. But that's kind of on par with the show. And obviously it doesn't respond, which we find out later on in the episode that she kind of has a Kylo Ren moment where basically talks to herself and convinces herself that her conclusions about Benjamin Sisko are that she's the exact same as him, and that's basically why she feels like she can do things herself. We got the return of Benjamin Sisko's son. I can't remember the actor's name, and it's nice to see him back. The problem is it's in this garbage to help Sam come to the conclusion that she can just do whatever she wants. The good thing is we find out that 800 years later they recorded the fact that he wears this kind of outfit, because he doesn't actually appear in the show because he's been dead probably for a long time. In her quest to find out if biological life forms are ready to integrate with holograms, she allows Caleb to access her programming and kind of fiddle around, which you'd think would be really intimate, but it's not. And so, in finding out that he can do this, he gets her drunk. So her programming can be accessed via a hologram, obviously. And look at all the things that you can do as this hologram. You can do alcohol, which they end up doing. You know, it goes alcohol, she chooses spirits, she gets vodka, and she takes shots of vodka. She ends up giving herself 12 shots of vodka. I feel like she would be almost dead, though, because she's small. But again, going back, you can see all the other stuff that you can get from her programming, which, why is this there? If she's just supposed to interact with the biologics and then report back and say whether or not, you know, they're ready to integrate with, why can she take cannabis, heroin, GHB, ketamine, morphine, and codeine? And there's an arrow that shows that there's more. What are we doing? Why would you create that for somebody who's supposed to be a representation of who your people are and to collect knowledge? Like, she doesn't need any of that. You would think that they would send somebody who can keep their mouth shut and observe, or can interact with people and actually absorb that information. Because she even says earlier in the episode that she can absorb information like faster than anybody, but she doesn't act like she can. So she gets drunk, makes a fool of herself. Caleb and the beta tard, they finally kiss, but it literally has no bearing on the story. We also get a little bit more of the representation. It's said that he's slumming it, which, I mean, I just, again, what are we doing? Now, somebody else in a video brought this up that I watched recently. Why is the War College even there? Like, shouldn't Starfleet and the War College have become one thing? Like, why is there a separate thing at all? You know, this is supposed to be Starfleet, where they've gotten past all of their differences. And you know, there's hundreds of different species that are involved in the Federation and everything. And I know some have drifted apart, and after the burn, things changed, if we're going to keep that in our continuity. But if the Vulcans are still there and the Romulans are still there, I feel like they would have gotten over all these hurdles, and there would not be a War College and Starfleet. It would just be Starfleet. And so this like forced division between the two colleges, it's forced, and it's not real. Like, you're just, there's not going to be any payoff to it where they have to work together, because at the end of the day they're basically both the same thing functionally. And I think it was just because Alex Kurtzman and whoever wrote with him, they don't understand the sources that they're drawing from, such as Harry Potter. In those books and movies, each of the four houses, they all like worked together. It was just a way to have the kids like kind of compete within themselves and with their fellow students, which is a great way to motivate kids to try to stay in line and do their best. Like, have a little bit of house pride. But at the end of the day, you just got your degree to be able to practice magic, I guess. In this, at the end, Starfleet and the War College, they've been learning all the same stuff, I assume. Okay, one's learning more about war, obviously, but like, why? Why? We've seen that the ship, or all the ships that they have shown, all have the same capabilities. Like, they all have torpedoes and phasers, and they're even being trained with phasers and like guns, and they're all kind of in the same basic vein. So why is there a division between the two? If anything, they could have had Starfleet have like 4 or 5 different houses or mascots like they did in one of the previous episodes, where they actually they showed that like laser tag fight, and they had 2 different mascots. Well, just do that. But I'm putting more thought into it than they did, so it doesn't really even matter. Anyway, so Sam continues the stereotype that we should stop Asian hate, whether those Asians are also aliens from another galaxy, or whether they are aliens from our own galaxy. And everybody's pretty shocked about this, but there's no consequences. So now we come to the end. Sam is given the book Anselm. Sam is given the finished and only copy of Jake Sisko's book, Anselm.
Pow. Wham. First try.
And Dax here is basically giving it to her, saying that Jake told her to only share it with people who would understand its message. We don't learn anything else about the book, so I don't really know what that's supposed to be. But in getting this book, I guess she reads it and absorbs it. Maybe that's what she did. And Jake Sisko actually appears to her. She asks him, so when I close this book, are you just going to disappear? And he says, I don't know. You're creating all this, or I think you are. So that tells me that, like, Jake's not really there. And we have the same kind of beat that we got in Rise of Skywalker, where Ben Solo finally healed from all of his whatever, and he hallucinates seeing Han Solo, and he forgives himself for all of the evil that he's ever done. Now, Sam hasn't committed a bunch of evil, but she has, however, read this book, and I guess she just tells herself that Benjamin Sisko and I are basically the same, and he did things his way, so I'm just going to do things my way. And that's what she takes from this. She also cries, and I don't know why, because she's a hologram. Why does she have tear ducts? I don't understand, but whatever. So she gives the book back to Dex, and she tells her fellow holograms that she's going to do whatever she wants, and that she'll call them when she's ready. Later, and then she disappears. And the episode ends where everybody is happy again, or they go to the gay bar, and they end it with a really good quote from Avery Brooks. They try to play it off like it was something that happened within the universe, but it's actually from a spoken word album that Avery Brooks did years ago. And at the very end, they say, "Thank you, Avery." And I was waiting for like a title screen to come up and say Avery Brooks 1950 something to 2000 whatever. And then I looked up and I'm like, wait a minute, he's not dead. Why did they play that off like he was dead, like he was a dead person? It's just very, very silly, and I don't know why they did that. Anyway, those are just my thoughts about this episode. I appreciate the fact that you stuck around this long to watch. I'm really enjoying covering something and having something each week to post. So if you like watching it, please give this a thumbs up and hype it up and let other people know that I'm trying my hardest to give my opinion on things. And I hope you like it. And if you like it, then thank you for liking it. I just like talking. They say if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. I clearly have eaten lots of fish in my life.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
But if you give a man a microphone and a camera, he'll just make YouTube videos, I guess. So,
what the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to?
Hopefully you guys like what I'm doing. I'm trying my best with what I've got, and I hope what I've got is enough to make you happy. So if you like this, like I said, please like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. And I'll see you in the next video. Like I always say at the end of every episode, live long and Qapla'.